The Canby Report was produced and recorded on the traditional territories of the Coquitlam, Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabeg, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. It's February 18th, 2023, and there are 1,337 days left until the Vancouver municipal elections. This is the Canby It's the Canby Report. I'm Matthew Naylor.
I'm Ian Bushfield. This is the most elite episode we can make. What a random number I pulled up for days until the next election. I love it.
So much more humor and exciting commentary and observations on Vancouver's political scene like that. Feel free to join our Patreon at patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yeah, keep the show going. Keep us making more content. We're getting back into the groove in 2023. It's been about 3 weeks. We'll aim for 2 to 3 weeks until things are really picking up and we have a lot more energy. But encourage us to do more. Patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yes, that's patreon.com. Ooh, there's a consultation alert. Everyone, to your computers. Type this URL in. It's shapeyourcity.ca/multiplexes.
Yes, last episode we talked about the missing middle initiative of allowing all of Vancouver to be 4 or 6 plexes. And we said we would let you know when the consultation is up. It is up. So go fill it in. Give your thoughts on whether that is sufficient, insufficient, or you hate shadows.
Going to come and devour us all. That is what loss taught me. Speaking of losses, election spending data is up.
Yeah, this is probably the most interesting thing for me personally in today's show, but like the least interesting to talk about on audio medium because it's not quite charts on a podcast, but it is like tables and numbers and data on a podcast. So I probably won't get too wonky into here. I haven't spent a ton of time on this data yet because there's a lot of it. I'm really hoping to go through and do things, especially locally, and figure out like who donated to which candidates in my community, and then what other candidates did they donate to, and create like network analyses and see if they even donated across borders and see like who are the independents who aren't that independent, essentially. Because you kind of know, but it's nice to be able to say, oh, look, these 6 people across 3 communities all have like the same donor base. Funny.
That'll definitely be interesting to see, and we look forward to reading it from you in the future.
For now, what we have to say is the basic top-level stuff, and we'll focus on Vancouver here because this is mostly a Vancouver podcast and sometimes the environs. But in terms of the political party spending, we use some data collected by a number of different sources. I know Vote Socialist actually did a good post summarizing most of this up, although they left team out of their list, which fair enough, but I added it in. And they totaled up the spending for the Mayor, Council, and Parks race, which is one report, and the school board, which is a second report for reasons we don't need to get into. But using all of that, BC outspent everyone with $2.1 million in the 2022 campaign. That's a pretty good amount of money. It's not Vision Vancouver 2014, like $4 million height of their throwing money at politics phase, but it's a good chunk of change to spend on a election.
And in both the mayor's race and spending totals, Forward together with Kennedy Stewart, talking it at $1.1 million. Moving on down that list, the MPA at $656,000, One City at $436,000, Team at $286,000, and Cope at $174,000.
Vision had 162. The Greens about the same. I might have made a typo in there. They both didn't spend that much. And both Socialists, 31,000. Progress Vancouver has not filed yet. I think they would get granted extenuating circumstances. What's notable here is like the NPA still spent in the upper echelons, but wasn't as big as they've been in the past and got nothing for it. So that's funny. One City, though, spent quite a bit at, coming in fourth, not having a mayor in there, outspending most of the other progressive opposition parties combined. Really good haul for them, although their electoral success out of it was quite limited.
take a look at what it was spending its money on, and perhaps evaluate it for the next campaign.
Like, remember that none of the progressive parties had that effective of a result, or that good of a result in the end.
No, especially if you take a look at what one city spent in the previous campaign and the amount that they spent in this campaign, any difference between those two is dead weight loss. Like, they got basically the same results out of two elections and spent X number of dollars more in this one. That isn't, like, they need to look at how they're spending that money in order. Like, admittedly, they are up against, like, a large block in ABC, but, like, I think that there are issues with how one city was campaigning that I think could have generated a better result for them.
Sure. It does show that they have a stronger fundraising apparatus than most of the other parties, especially like Cope Vision and the Greens, who are all, raising less than half of what they raising and spending. Like, Cope got some people elected for less money, but struggled. Vision is just not a factor. And this is just another proof. And this is also really bad for the Greens to be so low. And like, they got electeds, but they were electeds on name recognition alone and incumbency.
Yeah, I think this is a trouble result for the Greens. They need to beef up their funding apparatus if they want to remain a force in Vancouver politics, because eventually, the councillors that they have will not be able to be councillors anymore. This is like a very long-term project.
It's also very good for me to see like team be way behind one city in spending.
Yes, that is heartening. Also very interesting is some of the third-party advertiser spending. These are going to be province-wide numbers, but like some fascinating things cropping up there. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the National Police Federation, RCMP union, spent $81,370. Nonprofit housing agencies, this is a kind of amalgamated group, spent $61K. And this is my favorite, Hearth, Patio, and Barbecue Association, all spending this money in the Comox Valley, $21,032. What on earth is this?
I had to look this up, and I don't have it right in front of me, but basically there was a debate in the Comox Valley recently about like a proposed bylaw, and I don't even know if it got passed, around like banning fireplaces. And the Hearth, Patio, and Barbecue Association was like, we demand the right to burn shit for our customers. And I'm assuming just like wanted to put that information out there that certain candidates were pro-burning stuff and some were anti-burning stuff.
I was in favor of this Bartlett fellow, but now that I see that he's in favor of fire.
Speaking of, the Vancouver firefighters also spent a lot, $18,000. They were the fourth runner-up. Vancouver Police spent $12,000. Surrey Police Union was 10th at $7,500. The numbers dropped really fast.
Comox Valley Mainstream for Good Environment, $8,342. And then, yeah, that's basically all that's interesting. Although the BCSPCA spent $8,450.
Yeah, I remember going down through the entire list, and there were some like individuals who spent a couple thousand. One of them was connected to one of those Facebook pages in Squamish that was getting a bunch of attention for a while. And there was some stuff like that. But, if you're spending like 2,000 or 3,000, are you really affecting a local election? It's hard to say. I mean, maybe in some of the smaller communities, but
yeah,
even then, it's very interesting to have the data at least. And there we
will delve into edification and information in tweets and screeds to come. Some come, some go. Kareem Allen is leaving the mayor's office. Kareem Allen was the chief of staff for Sim and was also very involved in the ABC campaign for city council, and has taken this opportunity to return to private life and the private sector.
Yeah, this is kind of a common move. The campaign strategist becomes the chief of staff, and then once the transition has finished, moves on, either because of better job offers, they don't really like the pace, the skill sets are different.
Yeah, like it's it's kind of a nature of democracy. You have to be good at one in order to do the other. But There it is. Things we are not doing particularly well at are climate action. So, a report has come back to City Council. Some good news in it, but otherwise pretty bleak. Vancouver has reduced its emissions by 10% from 2007 to 2021. However, our targets are a 50% reduction in the next 7 years and carbon neutral by 2050.
Yeah, this is the report pushed on by the Climate Emergency Action Plan, which had 6 key big actions to help us reach our targets. So far, they say there is one of those 6 realms where we are likely to actually meet the goals, which is low carbon materials and construction practices, basically changing building codes to make buildings better. Everything else is either like in the yellow zone or unlikely to get us there. So that's complete walkable neighborhoods, something we'd both love to see for many reasons. Active transportation and transit's not even likely. Zero emission space and water heating is also unlikely. We're a little more optimistic, but not much, on zero emission vehicles and restoring our coasts and forests. But there's a lot of work to be done here. They flagged that the plan still has a $230 million funding gap, which perhaps the previous council could have dealt with.
Famously. Yeah. But they didn't, so what are you going to do?
Specifically, I'm referencing
climate action. It's the parking fees that Kennedy Stewart flipped his vote on the last minute and caused to fail by 1 vote. Yes, what a great mayor he was.
So yeah,
what a guy.
Lots of work to be done here. The report flags that 55% of the emissions in the city are related to natural gas use in buildings, and another 40% is related to burning from gas and diesel in vehicles, with like the trivial remainder from electrical use and waste facilities. So they really need to get buildings under control. They really need to get vehicles and people into transit. And all of this was imagined through an equity lens and what the last council was very good at, which was like putting high-minded, progressive frames on things. And they had struck a committee group to come up with a climate justice charter that would set some key actionable ways that this plan, as it rolled out, would be sure to make sure no one was left behind in many ways. That's dead now.
The ABC caucus struck the Climate Justice Charter from Future Work, simply asked staff to, quote, apply an equity lens, unquote, to the work. So basically this removes reporting inequity as a requirement of it. I mean, apply an equity lens is a pretty broad term. I think it gives quite a bit of latitude to staff to figure out what they want to with it. But yeah, as it stands, not the greatest moment for climate equity in the city.
One interesting thing came up during the debate, or at least I saw on Twitter, is that it was said that Pete Fry was suggesting that ABC caucused ahead of time to predetermine the outcome of this amendment vote. And this is a super wonky bit of procedure, but it gets into this question of like, there's a approach to municipal councils that's, I know, particularly enshrined in the US and is, I think, generally intended in Canada, but isn't always observed, but that the meeting should be held in the chamber and not in private in advance or otherwise. Most famously, this breaks down in the previous council where people have not even talked to one another seemingly about votes beforehand and then fail to get anywhere on anything. How do you weigh this kind of critique, Matthew?
You should be talking to people behind the scenes. You should be discussing this with your colleagues. Council could get more stuff done and not have things drag on forever and ever if there was a little bit of coordination and concise agreement about what you wanted. Horse trading is a part of politics. I'm not a huge fan of these types of laws in general, but so long as my understanding is that so long as they aren't taking a public stance on a vote before they cast their vote, this type of caucusing should be within the rules.
Yeah, I think the principle Fry is alluding to here is the decision should be made publicly in the debates of the chamber. And it's really that fundamental principle approach of it. It lacks the practical understanding of how politics works. And I do think there's value in, ABC members or all council members at least like stating their reasons on the public record for why they support or oppose something, but like deciding ahead of time, like what's the point of an electoral organization and having party at the municipal level to continue to exist after the election, if not to try to get some votes through?
Speaking
should be open to changing their mind, but...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, it's still a place for debate, but, like, thinking about your job before you do it is kind of part of politics. So you might get more motions passed, as you said. One place that isn't getting more motions passed is New Westminster, where the Progressive Caucus has been littering council agenda with frivolous motions. So just a brief reminder on New West politics. The Progressives are the Conservatives.
And I think it's Community First is the lefties or the center.
Yes.
The center lefties. And so the majority is the Community First. The two New West Progressives are Daniel Fontaine and Paul Minhas, and they've been bringing forward a number of motions. One of the recent ones was a meta motion, as far as I understood it, asking staff on how many motions are being brought forward and is it too many? I saw someone suggest that a lot of these motions could just be emails, which is just a great way to run a city council. Justin McElroy flagged this in the latest Metro Matters newsletter. Again, subscribe to it. It's great. He mentions that in the first 6 weeks of 2023, New West Council, that doesn't meet very often, has considered 20 motions from members, which is absurd.
But by contrast, New West Councils have, by this time, seen 1 or 2 motions.
The city of Vancouver was getting 4 or 5 per meeting with the very rainbow council of the last term. Now is probably getting
Rainbow Coalition,
yeah, and now they're getting like 2 or 3 maybe.
Yeah,
New West, it doesn't need that many, and especially ones that are asking questions of staff that could just literally be an email.
Use staff. Some people get elected to these things and they think it's youth parliament, and it's not. You are a working board member of a large company. You don't do stuff board meetings are for business, not nonsense.
And now the majority on New West Council is considering amending their procedure bylaw to limit councillors to 1 motion per meeting, which would be quite the radical change, but also maybe necessary.
Not a fan, to be honest. Folks need to grow up and stop making fools of themselves by bringing a bunch of nonsense motions that could be, better dealt with, conversations with staff.
We're going to see omnibus motions.
Yeah, it's like a super horrendous, this is rough. It's anti-democratic. Don't do it.
Well, this is how democracy died in Vancouver, you'll remember, Matthew, when they put a moratorium on member motions.
Yes, I
for
do.
A year.
I do. In fact, had a chance to get it out of their system. If this keeps going on, then fine, amend the rules of order. Just having the thought of the amendment of the rules of order in there is probably enough to get some people to shape up. If they don't, then cross that bridge when you come to it. To mix a couple metaphors for you there.
Or pro tip to New West voters, don't elect 2 New West progressives next time, because if there's only one of them, they can't second their motions.
True facts. A social housing project.
No. Speaking of democracy dying, our favorite no longer elected councillor, Melissa DeGenova, must be rolling over at home. She's not.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Because the Italian Cultural Center is being blighted by a social housing project, according to the Italian Cultural Center members.
Oh, no.
Democracy is dead, Matthew, because a unanimous vote supported social housing in East Van, which is apparently the only place they can build it.
In spite of some opposition in the surrounding community, the council has basically approved a supportive social housing project near the Italian Cultural Center in East Van. About 100 people spoke out against it because, I don't know, I don't
A
know.
lot of the comments I read were the usual worries about crime, drug users, increased needles and garbage in the area. Basically, it was a lot of stereotyping of people who live in supportive housing, and it was gross to see.
I just
All of
have
this against
hit.
people from
There
the
are
Italian Cultural Center saying they are inclusive and welcoming of everyone.
Just sorry. What the fuck are you talking about?
My favorite part
nonsense.
My favorite part is that people like Carol Branton drove out from Kitsilano to speak against this project because she sometimes goes there and would hate to see it ruined.
It's like
the Kits NIMBYs are like trying to keep the entire city free of people they hate.
It's not NIMBYs, it's NYABI. It's not in anyone's backyard.
Not in my city.
So basically, council did the right thing. Like, I hope, honestly, this isn't like a terrible outcome for this project. This is possibly what a efficient council might do. Who knows, though? It's early days.
They did pass an amendment to the project requiring, and this came from, I believe, Lisa Dominato, but it was definitely from an ABC member, that there would be a community advisory committee required for the project. And that would include members of the committee who could raise concerns if they come up. And like, I get what she's going for there, but damn, is that paternalistic to the project and the people who live there. Like, no strata building is going to have and your neighbors should be able to yell at you through a formalized structure because of who you are.
I mean, we do have, there's, I don't know, perhaps there should be just a wall of grievances in every community.
Speaking of grievances, people hated the cup fee, as we mentioned a few weeks ago, and now it's gone, or at least vote passed, and by this summer it will be gone.
So, Ken Sim, who declared a conflict of interest, can reap in all that sweet, sweet cup money in the remaining few months of this fucking stupid policy.
There was a tweet from Councillor Lenny Zhao that got roasted on Twitter because just before the vote, he flagged that he did a scientific survey of standing in a local coffee shop and counting the number of people who brought a reusable cup, and it was 0. So the fee didn't work because of his data.
I mean, that is the quality of scientific reporting that I brought to the podcast last episode. In fact, it is slightly more rigorous because it was taking more than a sample size of me. So, I mean, sometimes I just think you don't need something to tell you that something obviously isn't working. Like, sometimes things are obvious failures, and I think there has to be a total cultural shift. And this will, in order to achieve this kind of thing, but it's going to mean having the infrastructure for that, having reusable cups more available. Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, but
anyway, I just like that Ken Sim had to declare conflict of interest, and I didn't see exactly what it explicitly was, but I think it's because he owns the bagel shop, and presumably they sell coffee.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, the revenue from this cup fee wasn't going to fund anything. It was just going to the business owners.
Yeah. So the cup fee that made Ken Sim even richer, possibly. Mentioned infrastructure and things that were dumb, and let's talk about the Stanley Park bike lane because it came before the park board, and the park board has chosen the worst of all futures, which is both to kill the bike lane, but also to revive its corpse, possibly.
Oh, fun.
Oh, yeah. As Justin McElroy has tweeted a few times, the consultations will continue until morale improves.
So basically, what is happening is that council has decided to remove almost all of the bike lane, except for a handful of locations like Brockton Point, Lumberman's Arch, and Seeperley Meadow.
Yeah, they've been provided with 3 options, including keeping most of it. This came after staff pointed out that removing the entire bike lane would have cost $425,000, and the fiscally conservative newly elected park board members of ABC went, oh, that might be a bit rough, and now they have chosen a plan that will cost $333,000. So they've saved almost $100,000. But they have gone on beyond that, noting that, you know what, people seem to care about bike lanes, so let's continue the hell we're in and consult on doing a dedicated bike lane, but let's rush the fuck out of this and have a vote on it by November and hope to open it next year if it goes ahead.
They say government changes you. Like when you get involved, it gets its claws into you and it twists you into a shadow of your former self, and then you tower over Kitsilano and eat people. I don't know. It's Vancouver. Shadows are coming.
It seems like any proposal that staff are going to have to come forward with is going to be and here's the trees we have to cut down to open a bike lane. And that's the debate we're going to be at by the end of this year is do you love trees or bikes more, people?
Like I said, all of this could be solved by a hanging boardwalk suspended over the road.
The cyclists are not happy and have announced that critical mass's favorite or most hated form of collective bike ride / protest is coming back. You can join it on Friday, February 24th and the last Friday of every month, starting at the Vancouver Art Gallery, 5:30 in the evening. And so, yeah, that's going to piss a lot of drivers off, as it always did.
Yeah, and good for them.
Exactly. I love it. It's a great protest because it's exactly their right to ride their bikes in the road, which is where they're supposed to.
Police. So basically, the funding of the police plan, the 100 new officers that we're planning on hiring by the end of the year, only 10 more of those are getting paired with nurses or mental health support people, 14, I guess. It is 10 of those to CAR 8788, 4 to, I guess, the nursing program, however they're structuring this. And, 86 are not going to be paired with nurses or mental health workers in a totally unsurprising gift of money to the police.
Yeah, there was a recent announcement from Council of giving another $2.8 million to Vancouver Coastal Health to help expand mental health support, but only a small portion of that is expanding the program that ABC flagshipped in the election. Some more funding, I think, has also come from the province. Some of that has gone to, help expand the cops by this much. My favorite part here is in CTV News, where they ask Ken Sim and the mayor's office about how all of these new officers will be used, where they'll be deployed. The spokesperson from Sim's office deferred them to the police department, who said, quote, in an emailed statement, Mayor Sim has consistently indicated that council would not be prescriptive about operational decisions related to hiring, and that specifics related to the allocation of resources were best left in the hands of subject matter experts.
So, I don't know whether I would be more pissed off about this if they were just flagrantly giving, they are basically just flagrantly giving the money to the police to do hiring on their own terms without any kind of programmatic instruction, as is their elected, fucking duty, or whether they, actually shoveled money into completing this, ill-advised, ill-thought-out, half a loaf of a program, has some very legitimate criticisms about its effectiveness. It's gonna cost tens of millions of dollars to pull this thing off. And they're I don't know. I don't know whether I would want, I don't know what is the worst of the two worlds, actually getting what we were promised or having us this flagrantly ignored in favor of sopping to the police union.
Yeah, the CTV piece, which I'll link to in the show notes by Lisa Stisi, is a really good article from February 9th. It's got a lot of criticism in here and a lot of details from a number of mental health associations. They flag that Toronto's plan is actually a slightly better approach in terms of trying to find different ways to approach mental health crises that don't necessarily involve policing and the justice system all of the time, which is what CAR 8788 do, because you don't always need police there. And part of the challenge we have right now is the programs as they exist aren't tracking outcomes. They are tracking the number of calls they get, which, as people in the article say, don't tell us anything other than people are making calls.
Basically, it's an ongoing policy disaster, and we will continue to update you about it as it continues to Unfold.
Something that's not a policy disaster from disaster of a mayor is the Langley SkyTrain extension, which Surrey Council has been informed is on schedule to open in late 2028 as planned. The highway widening of the Fraser Highway is, quote, effectively complete. There's concerns from council about traffic because they don't understand that a SkyTrain will replace.
Did increasing the number of cars on the highway through a well-known process called induced fucking demand? Like, what are we doing here? God, I'm glad induced demand works both ways, because, like, the SkyTrain will pull people onto it, but god damn it, like, what the fuck were you thinking was going to happen? Of course there was going... Never mind. Whatever. Things are progressing as they should. They can't unbuild the SkyTrain.
It's just a nice piece of news overall that the train is moving forward, and that'll be nice to see when it's open. And then you can get from Langley to downtown Vancouver by transit in 65 minutes.
To get there, you will need to pass through that high-tax hellhole known as Surrey, which threatened to raise its taxes by 55%, but as it turns out, the proposal is more like a 17.5% tax hike, 9.5% of which is covering police transition costs.
Yeah, this is the budget that Mayor Brenda Locke has brought forward. She says it's expected that 9.5% will have to be covered in 2024 and 25 as well. It wasn't fully clear to me if that means there'll be at least increases of that much in the next 2 years. But
my suspicion would be no, this is like a 9% increase in what has to go get milled.
If you do the math, they say this works out to an increase of $400 a year for the average Surrey homeowner. That's $33 a month. So if you're a renter who's paying $16.50 a month and your landlord wants to max your increase at 2%, you will also be paying $33 a month more. But basically, a lot of people pay more than $16.50 a month in rent. So most people who rent will be facing larger increases than the average Surrey homeowner, despite that 17.5% sounding really big. That's also still like 8% is not related to policing. And like my Coquitlam tax bill, and they're a fairly fiscally conservative council, is looking at like 4 to 5% total increase. So Surrey's got a lot of stuff out of control relative to some of the others that are, I guess, cheap.
We don't say good. They are cheap. We are kind of undertaxed as a region, but, you know, you can always see the from both sides.
I mean, I will say this, at least like Coquitlam has nice facilities. Like I don't actually, like they do well with what they charge. So I'll complain about them later.
Speaking of facilities, the Vancouver School Board has unanimously approved the renaming of Lord Roberts Elementary School. The Parents Advisory Council said the name needed changing as Lord Roberts used concentration camps during the Boer War. Also, like, and I think possibly a better reason, wasn't from here, didn't have anything to do with here. I kind of feel like we should be renaming schools just on a kind of semi-regular basis. Like maybe every school's 25th anniversary, every jubilee, they get to rename their school.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I don't know if there's any decision on a new name or if they're just going to look into that, but I was just looking up Frederick Roberts, the first Earl of Roberts, Lord Roberts, and he's just like a pinnacle of British colonialism. He was in India in 1857 during the rebellion and laid siege to Delhi. He was in Abyssinia and Afghanistan. He was in Ireland. And then he went to the Anglo-Boer War and did some genocide. So fuck that guy.
Yeah, indeed. I noticed that none of those that you mentioned were Canada in any kind of way. Like, this guy is not part of our history. What the fuck? What's he doing on a school? Like, I know we were very... Like, and yet at the same time, I think it is important to note that who we choose to name stuff, who we choose to honor, tells us an important part about who we are and who we are becoming. And so, I would like there to be... call it whatever you want, a shame plaque. All the previous names for your school that you have deemed were unacceptable.
Someone else who I don't think was ever in this region, but is a Canadian at least, is Dr. Charles Best. I had to Google this right now. He was a medical scientist who co-discovered insulin, reasonable person to name a high school after. Maybe not in Coquitlam, because Dr. Best
from Ontario, yeah.
He's from Maine and he died in Toronto and spent most of his time at the University of Toronto, so not in Coquitlam. But there's a Dr. Charles Best High School in Coquitlam, and students from there have decided
It's cool, though. Like, I mean,
it is a very good thing.
Yeah, I suppose of all the things, it's sweet.
Students from Dr. Charles Best High School are planning to ask Coquitlam City Council on February 27th to endorse a upcoming Pride event in the city. Coquitlam has never actually had a Pride festival. There have been ones in Port Coquitlam and Port Moody and all across the region, obviously, but they're hoping to do something in June, Pride Month, and they want the city to raise the Pride flag. Now, Coquitlam is one of those cities that is a bunch of cowards and has the policy of not raising flags or doing proclamations, because what if the Nazis ask, Matthew, how can we say yes to the gay kids but not the Nazis?
I don't know, basic fucking common sense. Do your job as legislators. Do you have a fucking moral spine? Fucking grow up! I'm in a fucking mood tonight. This has put me all riled up.
Anyway, these kids are cool. These, young adults, these youths, very cool. Coquitlam City Council, I am just embarrassed. Like, this should not be controversial. You should be applauding. This is like how the council didn't show up to support the drag event held at the library.
I feel like at some point it's going to be like, which municipality in Vancouver still hasn't held a Pride event? And you know what? Anmore and Belcarra get a pass, I think, for the moment.
Lions Bay.
Yeah. Although Lions Bay, that's a whole other story. Lions Bay needs to get its shit together. Speaking of getting their shit together, Chilliwack has a new learning resources policy on the books, and also their school board is asking people to resign, all higgledy-piggledy. It's bananas out there. Books, they're not burning, but like, some people are like, pornography in our schools. However, at the core of this is good news. Yeah,
so a decade ago, Chilliwack School Board was probably exactly what you would have expected. I went to bat against them in 2013, I believe it was, because they were still giving Gideon Bibles to every grade 5 student, and I tried to get that school board to stop doing that, and they were like...
I know, that's awfully late for a Gideon's Bible. I don't know.
Yeah. The Bible is so great. We love them. One of the people from the Gideons was on school board at the time. It's been shifting over years, especially as a number of fights have come out around LGBTQ inclusion. And the current school board is majority progressive on those kind of issues, especially after 2013. I think it's 7-2, as we'll see in the vote that's about to come up. So this updated learning resource policy, it's the what books are okay in the library policy. And it included at least 2 new clauses that a number of people decided to come and speak out against. One is the principles of freedom of and to read, listen, and view must be protected for students. Teacher librarians will support reading choice for students. Families who wish students not to read certain topics can have those discussions at home, but it's not the role of teacher librarians to censor choices at the circulation desk. As someone who's on this board of the BC Civil Liberties Association, that sounds fucking great to me.
The principles, this is just a grammar quibble, the principles of freedom of to read, listen, view.
I think it's to read, to listen, to view, yeah.
The principles of freedom of...
Yeah, our Google Doc is flagging that as not good.
Freedom of to read...
Copied wrong into the Progress article.
It doesn't make any sense. However, it makes a lot of sense. Let's be very clear about what I'm saying. But, yeah, the grammar's bad. However, next article that was of note, no parent/guardian/caregiver or groups of parents/guardians/caregivers has the right to determine reading, viewing, or listening materials for students other than their own. Good sentiment. Bad legislative drafting again, but I'm gonna be I don't know. I'm gonna quibble. I quibble quaff.
The basic sentiment of both of these being that the school library is a place where reading choice will be respected, and students can come there with questions and get answers, because that's the point of a library. And if your personal view is that your kids should be sheltered or censored, you have those discussions at home. but you can't shelter your kids forever. This has come up against a subset of people in the community who, including a former trustee, who argue there's child porn in the libraries now as it exists, and that needs to be pulled, and others showing up with very vague insinuations that there are inappropriate materials in the school libraries that should be pulled. And some don't say what it is.
If you want to go on an anti-gay crusade, I simply demand that you saddle up and actually do it. Like, none of this vague insinuation bullshit. Like, if you want to be anti-sex, go be anti-sex. Do the hard work of being anti-sex. Some of these books, like, no one is putting Penthouse in the library, in part because I think that magazine is out of business. But, like, no one is putting, like, novels. They're novels.
Like, I don't even know if you'll get 50 Shades of Grey at a school library. Probably not. Like, they
Probably
still
not,
do,
no.
Yeah, have, like, a respect for age appropriateness, because these are trained professionals and they're not there to hand out smut. Now, on this question of, like, go and be a full censor if that's what you're going to be, the problem is they tried that a couple decades ago in Surrey, and it didn't work out well for them when it finally worked its way to the Supreme Court of Canada.
Oh, it did not.
So,
well, no.
School boards can't ban books on religious grounds.
Is there a moral standard for stuff that goes into schools? I think, yes, there is. At least on some level, we kind of follow that, is it pornography? I know it when I see it kind of attitude towards things. But, like, these books are, like, if you are going to write about complete humans and you want your children to be exposed to the complete scope of the human experience through novels, there should be some discussion about sexuality in there, because sexuality is a part of the human experience.
And morality is in the School Act. Section 76, this is the part that was litigated in the Chamberlain v. Surrey School District bit about banning books that talk about gay couples. Subsection 2 of it starts with, the highest morality must be inculcated, which is some beautiful antiquated language that probably wouldn't be written today. But the point being that, like, there is a broad collective morality. Like, we can quibble on the edges of it, but we generally agree, like, golden rule stuff is pretty universal. And so there is a common basis we can start from here, but
we don't we don't put Mein Kampf or Malleus, the Malleus Maleficarum or Protocols of the Elders of Zion in, like, a children's library. Those are books for, in this society, people who can understand the context in which they were made.
And it's so funny to me here, too, because, like, the people showing up to yell about this are, like, the people who probably also show up to the Freedom Convoy and are, like, one time talking about freedom and then the next day trying to ban books from kids. And it's just that sad irony of the age we live in.
Yeah. On that happy note, let's take a break. And since we're already in Chilliwack, let's head out to Cultus Lake
for our Vancouverata, how we end every episode. Cultus Lake is a fun little place to get away and go enjoy a beach and some water if you are in Metrovan. And people have been doing that for a long time. Settlers since the 1870s, at very least, have been flocking to the region. It had became a full provincial park in the 1950s, but even prior to that, there were so many people going that by the 1920s and 30s, the city of Chilliwack and the township of Chilliwack had to come together and say, well, if people are there, there should be a government there. And the best choice they chose was a park board. And so Cultus Lake, home to the other, even more forgotten about elected park board in North America.
So all of this is perhaps belied a little bit by Cultus's name, which is actually a Chinook jargon word, which means bad or good for nothing, though also perhaps free, without purpose, or nothing. So still not, like, great.
And like Cultus is pretty lovely as a vacation spot, whether you go camping or just do outdoor activities or go to the water park that's there.
Yes, this is a water park with a bunch of slides, and it's one of the main tourist draws to the community.
Have you been?
I have not. I had the opportunity to go last year. Sadly, had to work, but someday I do love a good water park.
I got to go last year. It's the first time I've been to that one. We'd gone camping at Cultus Lake pre-kids once on one of the campgrounds, I think run by the local First Nation. But the water park, we got to go for free on behalf of the Children's Heart Network. And they had a big all-day event there. And it was awesome to watch our 3-year-old like come through the gates, and her little eyes just looked up at this place that she couldn't imagine before it. And was like, I don't know how to comprehend what I'm looking at. And it's not Disneyland, right? It's not even that level.
No.
Like, it's a mid-sized water park that you or I would walk in and be like, that's not bad. Not bad.
Yeah.
It looks like there's some fun. But she was just like mind blown. It was great. Anyway, if you could take a 3-year-old to someplace mediocre for the first time, you'll see it like it's the best time. And yeah, that was a good day until she got very tired, ran, tripped, split her lip, and then it was like tears. And the ice cream was melting. Like, by the end of the day, we were like, let's get home. But the first half was really good.
Something to look forward to in the summers to come. That is, of course, Cultus Lake Water Park. For Leg and Boot Media, I'm Matthew Naylor.
And I'm Ian Bushfield.
Good night.